This is CBC, the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation. From CBC News.
Tonight, mission on hold. Canada's soldiers may not be needed. Mount Cashel, new charges in an old case. Bailey versus Johnson, the big race, the big bucks.
And on our magazine, it's a date for the title Fastest Man. The mind games begin right here.
I don't know that much about losing, and I don't want to find out.
I'm not getting out there and being fearful of Michael Johnson.
Take your marks and get ready for the race.
The National with Hannah Gartner and Peter Mansbridge.
Good evening. It is almost certain now what Ottawa had envisioned as a massive multinational military force in Central Africa will now likely be a non-military operation, and Canada's role is still to be determined. Today's key developments in Kigali. The Canadian commander, Lieutenant General Maurice Bourry, was told by Rwandan officials the international force is no longer necessary. In Washington, U.S. Defense Secretary William Perry said his country's military contribution is being scaled back. And in Ottawa, the Prime Minister admitted there's a possibility Canada's armed forces will not be needed. Our coverage begins with the CBC's Susan Harada.
Just a few days ago, the Prime Minister was the driving force behind an ambitious relief effort, led by Canada, poised to send troops in with guns at the ready. But today, Jean Chrétien acknowledged for the first time the plug could be pulled on the military mission.
It might be that in the next 3 or 4 days, we might be in a situation where the armed forces will not be needed anymore.
But the U.S. got there first. Hours before, the Clinton administration had already set the bottom line.
Our current thinking is that the U.S. contribution to this effort will be less than 1,000 troops. And these will be support, logistics troops, rather than combat troops.
At National Defense Headquarters, so many plans have been made, then changed, then scrapped, they finally put it all on hold.
Yeah, I'm not sure what their exact itineraries are.
They're not sure what will happen with the Canadian soldiers either, the ones grounded in Entebbe, Uganda, because the Rwandan government won't let them into Rwanda.
Are you convinced that the mission is welcome here?
I think that the next 48 hours, 72 hours are going to be crucial to determine the answer to your question. I think it will depend very much upon what is going to happen on the ground.
A big question mark hangs over the fate of hundreds of thousands of refugees still stranded in Zaire. But the focus has shifted to Rwanda now, to the thousands of refugees who've returned home.
Let's tailor the response to the need. That's the basic incident. We're not sort of saying that that we want to have a force for the sake of having a force. We put together the force in order to meet a real, dramatic, tragic need.
The challenge in the days ahead is defining that need. Tomorrow in New York, the diplomats will talk. On Friday, military planners are supposed to gather in Germany. And on Saturday, the focus will shift to Geneva and to the humanitarian aspect. And that may wind up being the most important meeting of all. Susan Harada, CBC News, Ottawa.
The reason for all this political posturing has always been the refugees. The CBC's Martin C. Mungle has been with the refugees, reporting on their plight for more than 2 weeks now. Today, he found 2 Canadians who are helping out.
Hutu refugees fight for space on a truck. It is a wild scramble because they are desperate, tired of walking, determined to find another way to make the journey.
I am going at home at about 100 kilometers. I am wondering how I will arrive at my home.
They've walked several days to get here, yet they've made it just a few kilometers inside the Rwandan border. They're exhausted, hungry, and sick, and many thousands are traumatized by the journey and what they've left behind. Children, lost in the chaos to flee Zaire. They cling to a thin rope because they have no parents to hold. It can happen so easily. All they have to do is let go. In the crush, in the rush of people, they are gone.
Can you confirm that we're picking up 4 unaccompanied children to deliver to the Unaccompanied Children Center? Over.
Relief agencies patrol the roads on the lookout for children. Phil Marr and Ali Blair from Canada say thousands have been separated from parents. This little girl has been wandering on her own for over a week. These brothers even longer.
It's hard, I mean, for me personally, because I'm a dad, you know, and, you know, when I think about, you know, my child being lost, you know, it really does something to you.
They barely have the strength to drink, to bite into a biscuit. They have not eaten in days, yet they cannot smile. They were orphaned 2 years ago. Now they're alone again. Their only surviving relative is somewhere on the road ahead. Martin Simungo, CBC News, Gisenyi in Rwanda.
And news about another Canadian mission tonight, the one in Haiti. It is being extended. Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy says Haiti still needs help. 700 soldiers and 100 RCMP officers are serving there. In Illinois tonight, 2 planes collided on a runway and exploded in a fireball. There were 11 people on one aircraft and 2 on the other. No one survived the accident. The planes collided at the intersection of 2 runways. The larger plane was landing on one as the smaller was taking off on another. It was dark at the time, but visibility was 16 kilometers. Canadians will pay lower employment insurance premiums next year. They'll drop for both individuals and employers by 1.7%. And the most an individual will pay is $1,131. That's down by $19.50. But in spite of the smaller premiums, the surplus in the Employment Insurance Fund will still double to $10 billion next year. Newfoundland's Mount Cashel Orphanage is gone, but the scandal is not over yet. In a surprise development today, 7 more men were charged with abusing boys. As Tonda McCharles reports, these are allegations dating back as far as 1950.
Police call it Mount Cashel Phase 2, a wide-ranging investigation into the early years.
9 counts of indecent assault, 6 counts of gross indecency, 2 counts of buggery, and 6 counts.
In all, 59 charges of physical and sexual abuse of 17 of the boys who lived at the now demolished Mount Cashel Orphanage. Abuse said to have happened up to 45 years ago. Charged are a worker and 6 former Christian brothers, some of whom are seen in these yearbook photos. 4 now live in the U.S. Another is John Lawler, now 59 years old, living in Quebec. He is the son of this man, former Police Chief John Lawler. He headed the Royal Newfoundland Constabulary when the allegations of abuse at Mount Cashel first surfaced in the mid-70s.
Your Honor, that I don't remember, tell you the truth.
At the Mount Cashel inquiry, Chief Lawler denied a cover-up. Since '89, Sergeant Mark Wall investigated allegations by more than 100 former Mount Cashel boys.
In cases, it was really remarkable. I was surprised in some cases, the memories of people.
It ends a lot of uncertainty for a lot of people who have made these allegations and were concerned that perhaps they weren't being listened to.
I think at some point, too, there has to be some closure of this investigation with regards to the victims as well as the accused persons and the public generally, that we have to know that you know, this is not going to go on and on and on.
The police say this now formally closes all the Mount Cashel investigations. A request has been sent to Ottawa to extradite the 4 accused living in the U.S., and that process could still take a long time. Tonda McCharles, CBC News, St. John's.
A jump in the annual inflation rate last month. It went from 1.5% in September up to 1.8%. That's the highest it has been this year. Also up, bankruptcies. As of the end of September, they were up 20% from last year. The most important business in Golden, British Columbia is teetering on the edge of bankruptcy. It's a plywood mill, and it's been shut down for weeks. Its employees out of work. Today, the company proposed some desperate measures to turn things around. Ian Hannamansing reports.
They lined up early, anxious to find out if Evans Forest Products would give them back their jobs. For 6 weeks now, the plywood mill has been idle, in receivership. Now, the owners have a recovery plan, but...
There's some very unpleasant things in here. We're not trying to suggest otherwise.
The message was blunt. Accept a 20% cut in pay for the next 12 months and hope that gets the mill back on its feet. Refuse and the company goes bankrupt. There was some anger here, but the prevailing mood seemed to be one of resignation.
Well, I don't think there's any other choice other than go for this proposal. Otherwise, the community will basically die as we see it today.
For me to go and start over again, I think I'm too old for that.
For Gordon Frisky, the numbers make the choice clear. Even with the cut, he would make over $100 more a week than he's getting now on unemployment.
If this helps the company and we go full-time, then I donated 20% of my gross wages for 1 year, and it set it up so that I can live here for the rest of my life, basically. And there's something to be something there for my family, not too, eh?
But the company says an employee wage rollback on its own will not be enough to reopen this mill. Evans is also demanding significant concessions from contractors who provide lumber, from creditors, and especially from the provincial government.
The list of demands for the government is lengthy. It includes millions of dollars in loans, deferred taxes, and $35 million to build logging roads. BC's forest minister was cautious.
We have a responsibility to the taxpayers of British Columbia. We have a responsibility to the community of Golden to ensure that this isn't a quick fix that will then crash again.
But the company has set a deadline of Friday to hear back from the government, the union, and other parties. It says it has to reopen this plant soon or see it tumble into bankruptcy. Ian Hannamansing, CBC News, Golden, British Columbia.
Still ahead in tonight's news, some old bones, an old astronaut, and an old atheist at the Vatican. And later on our almanac, a special memorial for our Canadian hero this week.
And on our magazine, get ready for the showdown. Bailey versus Johnson. One will be the fastest man. The height.
I've proven that I am the best, and that's not at stake right here, right now.
The money.
Sports is showbiz. I mean, that's what it is.
Here comes the race. We'll also have a report from deep inside Afghanistan. A new Islamic fundamentalism means women can't go to school and children can't fly kites. Now this warlord is fighting back behind the rebel lines.
Well, okay, there's still about 6 months from the starting line, but for a while today it seemed as if the race was already on. Donovan Bailey and Michael Johnson engaging in some verbal sprints as they confirmed a 150-meter showdown will happen. Jeffrey Kaufman has more now on the race and the reward.
Like two scrappy prize fighters, American sprinter Michael Johnson and Canadian Donovan Bailey came together today to announce a race that will be their fight to be the fastest.
I told you that this race would happen, and it would be on my terms. I'm here now, and it's going to happen in May, so I'm really looking forward to taking on my man here.
I never set out to be the world's fastest man or to have that title, but for some reason, a lot of people decided that they wanted to give me that title. I'm not going to give it up that easy.
Here's where the rivalry begins. That's Bailey on top, setting a world record in the 100-meter at the Atlanta Olympics and claiming the title fastest man in the world. Not so fast, said the Americans. That's Michael Johnson on the bottom, winning gold in the 200-meter and the 400-meter. The American media anointed their man fastest man in the world.
We are excited to have the opportunity to have organized and orchestrated this event.
It is already being dubbed the Sprint for a Mint, a 150-meter race, $500,000 for each athlete just for showing up, another $1 million for the winner. And those are U.S. dollars.
This event is about entertainment, it's about business, and it's about sport. I'll leave it up to you to determine which order of priority those will fall into, but it's all three.
It's about time we start getting some recognition here in Canada.
In the Canadian track world, the attention is being greeted as good news, although runners here are baffled by the decision to run a 150-meter race rather than the standard 100, 200, or 400 meters.
I'm not really sure what it means, because the person who wins this race, what does it tell us? It means they're the fastest person over 150 meters, but 150 meters really isn't a true distance.
Right now, this event is a lot of hype without a home. Toronto's just one of 5 North American cities being considered. A final decision on location is expected in the next few weeks.
Jeffrey Kaufman, CBC News, Toronto.
Passengers say it could have been a catastrophe, a fire on board a freight train deep beneath the English Channel overnight. At least 8 people were rushed to hospital with injuries after flames and fumes began choking the Channel Tunnel. It was the first serious accident since the rail link between Britain and France was opened 2 years ago. It's not clear what caused the fire. Full service will not be restored for weeks. A bit of a thaw today in the often frosty relationship between Cuba and the Roman Catholic Church. The Pope welcomed one of the world's last communist leaders, Cuba's Fidel Castro, to the Vatican. Castro then invited the Pope to visit Cuba sometime next year. The pontiff accepted, but only on the condition he be allowed to speak and travel freely. And here's a man on quite a mission. He's 61-year-old Story Musgrave, just moments away from becoming the oldest person ever to blast off into space, and from becoming the only astronaut ever to fly on all 5 space shuttles. For the record, he took off in the Columbia today, which happens to be the oldest shuttle in NASA's fleet. The United States took on the world today, moving to block the UN Secretary General from winning a second term. The U.S. was the only nation to vote against Boutros Boutros-Ghali. But as David Holton reports, that one vote has clout.
When the 15 members of the Security Council gathered for the vote, U.S. Ambassador Madeleine Albright was alone in vetoing the re-election of Boutros Boutros-Ghali. Secretary General spokeswoman Silvana Foa claimed a moral victory.
14-1. Somebody told me this morning that in a soccer game when the score was 14-1, the team with 14 could expect to win.
But this wasn't a soccer game, but the Security Council, where the U.S. has a veto and can defy world opinion. Albright said the UN needs a new Secretary General, someone better able than Boutros-Ghali to reform the UN. What just about everyone else is saying, though, is that Boutros-Ghali was a casualty of election politics in the U.S., that President Clinton caved in to Republican pressures to get rid of a Secretary General regarded as too independent. Albright urged Boutros-Ghali to get the message and step down.
It's up to the Secretary General. We've made our points clear.
To sweeten the pill, the U.S. is telling African delegates that the new Secretary General should be another African, conforming to a UN tradition that every region holds the position for 2 terms. But some countries say today's vote gives them ammunition to fight to save Boutros-Ghali.
It proved that the whole world was behind Africa and behind the candidate that Africa chose, which is the current Secretary General.
As for Boutros-Ghali, he told the CBC on the weekend that he's more concerned with world crises than what happens when his term expires at the end of the year.
And I will continue to do my job until the 31 of December at 12 o'clock. And I'm spending more time on those problems than on the problems related to my re-election.
Tonight, there are no signs the Secretary General will give up and every indication of a continued battle on the issue. But Western diplomats here say that ultimately Boutros-Ghali can't dodge the American bullet and will become the first UN Secretary General to be denied a second term. David Holton, CBC News at the United Nations.
There's more stormy weather in the west. This time it's pummeling Saskatchewan. There's a lot of blowing snow and visibility is next to nil at times. Driving can be dangerous, and when the storm ends, the temperature will plunge to a daytime high of about -20. Just 2 days now till the long-awaited report by the Royal Commission on Canada's Aboriginal peoples. It will be a vast examination of native life, with recommendations on how to bring about positive change. Tonight, in the run-up to the Commission's findings, Eric Sorensen brings us the first of 2 special reports. This one, a look at life on the reserve.
The Lac La Ronge Indian Band is the biggest in northern Saskatchewan, and its business arm, KDC, one of the biggest employers. It runs the local meat smoking plant, a huge trucking company, the local hotel, and other businesses.
Good morning, La Ronge Indian Band.
Sort of creates a false image because the employment opportunities that we've created through the band, through KDC, is nowhere near the answer to what the future population coming up, the young population that's coming up.
You don't have to look far to see the real economic situation. Scores of small, broken-down homes, no running water, severe overcrowding.
How cold the house is. The conditions are very sad. It's just not It's just not fit for people to live in.
In spite of economic growth in Aboriginal communities and on reserves like this, statistics suggest that socially and economically things are actually getting worse, and the outlook is especially bleak for young people.
Sometimes it is frustrating to find a job around here.
Frustrating may be an understatement. Aboriginal unemployment across Canada in 1981 stood at 16%. 10 years later, it had jumped to 25%. That's bad enough, but for young people on reserves like this, the jobless rate is estimated to be a shocking 47%.
There are more people who need jobs than there are jobs right now. Most of them just give up. They don't bother looking for it.
It's going to get worse. I mean, there's no question about that.
This sociologist says unemployment will be compounded by the population boom.
The Aboriginal population is the fastest growing population in the country. We project in Saskatchewan that, you know, not too far into the next century, they're going to be close to a majority of this province's population.
This week, the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples is expected to call for more government money to deal with the crisis on reserves.
My fear is that the average Canadian will simply tune out at that point and not listen, and without going the extra step of trying to understand the fact that Indian people in this country live in absolute poverty.
The L'Orange Band creates new jobs every year, but still loses ground to joblessness and despair.
All they got to look forward to is welfare.
It's not a very bright outlook.
No, it isn't.
When they're old enough, many will simply leave the reserve for big Canadian cities, where new problems await. Eric Sorensen, CBC News, L'Orange, Saskatchewan.
On tomorrow's National, Red Sharon will look at some of those problems facing Native people in the cities. How old is old? Well, how about 2.3 million years old? A team of Canadian researchers say that's the age of a human fossil they were asked to put a date on. The fossil of an upper jaw was found in Ethiopia, along with some stone tools. Together with their colleagues in California, scientists at the University of Toronto used this special lab to date the find.
2.3 million years, with a certain amount of error, plus or minus 70,000 years, which sounds like a lot of time, but relative to 2.3 million, it's not a big deal at all.
The jaw is 400,000 years older than any other fossil from the Homo species. Canada's legal community is mourning the legend named J.J. Robinette. He died yesterday, just short of his 90th birthday. Many consider that Robinette was the country's greatest courtroom lawyer, whether he was representing the Crown or defending someone charged with murder. Susan Bonner now with his story.
It was 1929 when John Josiah Robinette became a lawyer and launched a unique career.
Mr. Robinette could move from a complicated bankruptcy case to a complicated corporate case to a complicated any kind of case on any day of the week and just roam on the tops of the mountain ranges of law with absolute ease.
His fame began with a sordid murder trial in 1947. Evelyn Dick was convicted of murdering her husband and disposing of his body parts on a Hamilton mountain. Robinette took on her appeal. She was acquitted. His name was made.
It had sex. It had a torso. It had stolen streetcar tickets. It had everything imaginable to make an interesting case.
He didn't always win. In 1952, Steve Suchan, a member of the infamous Boyd Gang, was convicted of murdering a Toronto police officer. Suchan was hanged. Robinette stopped taking murder cases and began a lifelong campaign against capital punishment.
I just do not think that the state has the right to take a person's life.
It was at the Supreme Court of Canada that Robinette capped his career. Justice John Sapinka admired his skills.
He argued far more cases than anybody that I know in this court, and the tough constitutional cases, and I think he had a substantial effect on the jurisprudence of this court.
In 1981, Robinette fought and won what he called his most important case, representing the federal government in its bid to repatriate the Constitution. His work inspires reverence.
Well, he set a standard for advocates that will never be ever reached by any other lawyer.
Susan Bonner, CBC News, Toronto.
And that's the news for now. Here's Hannah Gartner with our magazine.
Who will be the fastest man? The race starts here. Hello. They're already off and running. Two men, both claiming to be the fastest. To the victor, $1 million, U.S., and full bragging rights, not to mention the pride of a country. In a moment, we will talk to Donovan Bailey and Michael Johnson. But we begin with the Nationals' Tom Alderman and why this is no ordinary foot race.
With so many insoluble puzzles, Rwanda, the Middle East, the deficit, it's nice to know there's one question that can be solved in 15 seconds or less. Who is the world's fastest man? Our guy, Canadian Donovan Bailey, who won the 100-meter dash at the recent Olympics. The 100-meter winner is traditionally acknowledged to be the fastest. Or their guy, American Michael Johnson, who took the 200-meter race.
It is a world record for Michael Johnson!
And darn if those argumentative Americans haven't done some nitpicking math and suddenly decided that, forget the old rules, their guy is fastest. So it seems natural that the two should go head-to-head at, split the difference, 150 meters. Olympic champs like Bailey haven't much to do between Olympics anyway.
Rodriguez!
So who's to say no to a $2 million purse, probably in May, at a site to be determined? Cocky Donovan has always been game to rev up any event.
I could have been at the top with anything. I think if I played baseball in high school, I never played baseball, but I think if I played baseball, I would have played in the majors. And basketball, I just don't know because I just never actually took the time out to learn about it. Any other sport, I mean, football is easy. I mean, that's for sure. I mean, I had the speed and I had the athletic ability more so than probably any football player that's out there playing right now.
Go. It's a manufactured entertainment, but what sports event isn't nowadays? Go. Sponsors will doubtless come forward. Track stars sell product. So while the combatants prepare, for a little while at least, we can forget that everlasting deficit and debate the probable outcome. Whether an explosive runner, Bailey, can whip their pretender to the throne, Johnson. A little like when Bobby Riggs met Billie Jean King, when Harry met Sally. Now it's when Bailey meets Johnson. Only the naive would agree it's a momentous event. It's a what-if situation, a marketing opportunity, an irresistible meeting of sports and showbiz. For The National, I'm Tom Alderman.
Joining us, Canada's 100-meter man, Donovan Bailey. You know, there has been so much promotion, so much hype. I'm really not sure whether this is about sports or showbiz. What is the point of this race?
Well, I think it's something in a non-Olympic year. I think it's very important again, to generate this sort of publicity.
Well, you're going to get $500,000 just to show up, and if you win, you're going to make $1 million.
Right.
15 seconds of work takes my breath away.
Hopefully, 14.5 seconds worth.
You are a businessman. You've been a financial advisor. Tell me, how do the promoters, how does anybody but you make money on 15 seconds?
Well, as in a professional sport like boxing, for instance, I mean, Mike Tyson gets $100 million for 30 seconds work, so I mean, you can't really compare it.
Tell me, is there more pressure becoming the best or staying on top?
Well, I mean, I think first of all that I've proven that I am the best, and that's not at stake right here, right now.
In the end, you lose nothing. So what's at stake here? It's only for the money and the promotion?
Oh, not at all. I think it's very important for the promotion. I think track and field has been has needed something unique in North America because the sport's dying. I mean, it's still very big in Europe. It's still very big in Asia. So I mean, I think this event is definitely something that that will bring some recognition back to track and field in a non-Olympic year.
Now, what about Michael Johnson? I get the feeling it's a bit of a grudge match with him?
Well, no, there's not really any grudge match because the last time I raced him, I beat him pretty bad.
You sound pretty confident. You know, it's almost like, forgive me, it's almost like before wrestling matches, you know, the two guys come out, strut their stuff, primp, and say mean things to each other, all to get the audience excited?
Well, no, I think that, I respect him as a competitor. I truly believe that, you know, he's proven himself as one of the greatest athletes in track and field history in his performance in Atlanta. But, when it comes down to it, if I'm going to be competing against him, I'm going to take him just like any other competitor. It doesn't really matter to me. I'm not getting out there and being fearful of Michael Johnson. I think that what I'm fearful of, the things that I'm going to do.
Do you think it's going to be different running for money rather than running for an Olympic medal?
Well, you know what? I don't think the money factor. I still think I'm representing my country. I definitely, because we're definitely in a situation where it's Canada versus USA.
Thank you, Donovan. Good luck.
All right, thank you.
Bye.
Okay, bye.
Joining me now, the American challenger, Michael Johnson. You said in your press conference that this race was organized on Donovan's terms. What does that mean?
Well, that was a sarcastic remark in that Donovan first mentioned that this was going to be run on his terms. And, you know, I'm not going to let everything be Donovan's terms. I've got to look out for my side. But we've worked together, and we've worked together well with the organizers to put this event on. And I think that everyone's happy with the terms now.
You like to give Bailey some shots. Is that shtick, or do you really hold a grudge?
I hold a grudge as far as, you know, Donovan being a competitor. You know, we're competing against one another, and he wants to win the race, and I do too. But, that's my attitude towards any of my competitors as far as on the track. As far as personally, no, I don't have anything against Donovan at all. He's a nice guy, and, you know, I feel that way about most of my competitors. So I don't have anything against him personally, but when we step on the track, there's definitely a rivalry, and I don't like him when we're on the track.
It's about winning.
That's right.
Winning feels better than losing.
I don't know that much about losing, and I don't want to find out.
Now, there is so much hype around this thing. I asked Donovan as well, is this really sports, or is it showbiz, entertainment?
Sports is showbiz. That's what it is. Basketball, wrestling, everything. You look at the sports is showbiz, and I think that the problem with track is that in the past it hasn't been. And this is the opportunity for track and field to become one of those sports that is showbiz. And I think that that'll help the sport, and it'll help the sport to grow. And that's what I'm interested in.
Michael, because there is no real world title, no medal attached to this, you can't really lose, can you? Either way, you make money.
Well, I think that, you know, of course you lose. You lose the race. As from a fan standpoint, yeah, it may look like that, but as competitors, we don't like to lose. And, yeah, you lose. If someone, you know, one of us is going to lose the race, and whoever loses, they lose the race. And, we take that very seriously as competitors. That's what makes us champions. We don't like to lose, and we don't take that lightly. What makes true champions are the people that can separate the money issue and concentrate on, I want to win this race. If you're just going in there for the money, you won't win the race because you can't be motivated to go out there and train when you've already got $500,000 in your pocket.
Now, all these pre-race interviews, all of the stuff, that's just publicity bravado. It's not to drive the other guy crazy, is it?
No, I don't think that's what it is. I don't think that, you know, I'm not trying to drive Donovan crazy. He's not trying to drive me crazy. I'm stating the way that I really feel, and he's stating the way that he really feels. He really wants to win this race, and so do I. And, you know, I think that, you know, Donovan's been kind of inconsistent in some of the things that he's said, and he feels that, you know, he's been treated wrong by not, you know, having everyone in the world call him the fastest man in the world, so he's got that to prove. And so, those are the ways that we really feel. Those are our true feelings. So it's not something that's made up. Those are the ways, that's our true feeling.
But don't you have something to prove as well because of this fastest man in the world business? It is traditionally known that the guy who runs the fastest 100 meters is the fastest man in the world. Don't you feel a little sheepish and insecure that you are carrying this title? Some Americans are calling you that.
I can tell I'm in Canada now. At first I thought I didn't know where I was. Now I know I'm in Canada. No, I don't feel sheepish at all, and, you know, yes, you're right. Traditionally, that title has gone to the 100-meter guy, but you have to ask yourself this question. I'm not the one who's organizing this event. Someone else is, and we've had about 10 different promoters who are interested in organizing this event, and you have to understand that, you know, yeah, traditionally, the title has gone to the 100-meter runner, but if I hadn't run 19.3 seconds in the 200 meters, no one would have started calling me the fastest man in the world. Donovan wouldn't have had any reason to be disappointed, and no one would have had a reason to come to us two guys and say, hey, let's put a race on.
Michael, I pride myself on trying to be an objective journalist, so I made a little slip.
You were doing pretty good. You were doing pretty good. We all slip up once or twice.
Michael Johnson, it's good talking to you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Please stay with us when we come back. A journey behind the rebel lines of Afghanistan, a country in the grips of Islamic fundamentalism. You're going to meet a man who could break its hold. They're called the Taliban. 2 years ago, they were a band of Muslim clerics. Today, they control much of Afghanistan with a draconian social order. Now, one man is challenging them. Tonight, we have rare access to the warlord who holds the key to Afghanistan's future. Here's Eric Campbell of the Australian documentary program Foreign Correspondent with his report, Behind the Rebel Lines.
On a freezing mountain pass, the troops of an Afghan warlord look down on a fanatical opponent. To the south, the Islamic warriors of the Taliban are fighting a full-scale war with the ousted government army. But these soldiers fight for a different master, and they feel no fear of Taliban. This is the army of Afghanistan's great survivor, the warlord General Abdul Rashid Dostum. He doesn't serve the central government, but he has long used this fighting force to determine who the central government will be. As leader of the Jumbish faction, General Dostum controls 6 northern provinces with the power of an absolute monarch. His people even call him Pasha, the king.
Please.
Yeah. General Dostum doesn't normally take time off from battle plans, but as the Taliban advanced, he gave us a brief glimpse inside his war room as he plotted his army's response.
How do you do?
The meeting had one strict condition. We could talk, but I could not ask questions. But General Dostum needed little prompting to boast of his power.
We saw your army today and we were very impressed with their preparedness.
Just you have seen 1 or 2 brigades. If you go to other places, if you see all of them, they are very much more prepared than this.
Right.
Yeah, by the help of God. I'm not weak from the point of army.
And it's here on the southern edge of his kingdom that Dostum put pay to the Taliban advance. The Salong Pass is the key to his stronghold, the one gateway between the south and north. The road passes through kilometers of tunnels before winding through the mountains of the Hindu Kush. The last soldiers to try to fight here were the Soviet army. Their ruined tanks litter the highway. By Afghan standards, they also have prosperity, with thriving trade and vast reserves of gas. And most are prepared to fight for their independence and freedom. In Dostum's capital, Mazar-e-Sharif, people have reacted in horror to Taliban decrees banning music and smoking. They now know even their children would be in breach of Taliban law. In Kabul, they banned kites for distracting children from the scriptures. But the greatest affront to the Taliban is that women here lead normal lives in public.
What do you know about the nouns? Nouns are one of the 8 parts of speech, and with names, a place, a person.
Isabel Ahmadi is 3 months from graduating from the only university in Afghanistan the Taliban couldn't stop women attending.
What do you know about...
At first I thought that Taliban want to establish a strong central government in Afghanistan, and it was good. But further, when we saw their treatment against women, that they don't let them work, and even go outside if it's very, we are very worried about our future, that what happens with us, because we are studying at the university now, and we are, and we wish a good future for ourselves.
The irony is this is a deeply conservative Muslim state. By tradition, most women wear full-length veils in public. Even some students wait till they reach the campus before changing into casual clothes. The mosque is as central to community life as anywhere in the country, and many of its adherents are fundamentalists. But even the most devout have been shocked by the Taliban extremism.
According to religious, the holy Islam religion, man and woman have the same rights, and man and woman both can study, work.
But the war is not, and never has been, a simple matter of religion. The past fighting between factions has as much to do with Afghanistan's neighbours as with Afghanistan itself. Countries that have played on the religious and ethnic differences here to further their ends. And that, as much as anything, has ensured the fighting goes on. Pakistan professes neutrality, but they're widely believed to support the Taliban as a means of guaranteeing access to Central Asia. When the Taliban seized Kabul, with Pakistan's apparent backing, Dostum moved his troops to the Salang Pass to prevent them advancing any further north. With the Taliban locked out, he could plan his next move, to fight them or to join them. General Dostum is a master at picking sides and emerging the winner. Originally, he was chief commander to the pro-Soviet regime of President Najibullah. In 1992, he switched sides to the rebel Mujahideen, led by another warlord, Ahmad Shah Massoud. Alongside Massoud's men, Dostum's troops stormed the capital. Najibullah became a virtual prisoner in the sanctuary of the UN compound. Under the Mujahideen government, General Dostum got what he wanted, total control over his provinces. But when the government of President Rabbani challenged him, he besieged and shelled Kabul, all the while proclaiming his desire for peace. Just weeks ago, his forces stood by as the Taliban seized Kabul and hanged his old boss, Muhammad Najibullah. An act of brutality that could only have made General Dostum wonder whether the same fate awaited him. When we met him, he was once again hedging his bets. While his army was preparing for war, a delegation he had sent to Kabul was talking peace. But the Taliban had no intention of laying down their arms. Unable to pass through Salang, they turned their full force on government soldiers who had retreated to the nearby Panjshir Valley. The ousted military chief, Ahmad Shah Massoud, was fighting a rearguard battle to fend them off. President Rabbani had disappeared, apparently on the run. In fact, he had turned to the one man who could save him, his old enemy, General Dostum. We found Rabbani near the Salang Pass, meeting with Dostum's followers in a bid for military support. In his first interview since fleeing Kabul, he told me of the plan for a counterattack.
و همه به تلاشی هستند که هر چیز زودتر این اشغال پایان بپذیرد و جنگ در کشور ما خاتمه بیابد و به این اساس البته جنرال دوستم ما تماس‌ها و ارتباطات تلفنی داشتیم و داریم.
The next day, Dostum's full arsenal was placed at the former government's disposal. As we stood at the Salang Pass, the distant sound of gunfire marked the start of the counterattack. But General Dostum did not send his soldiers into battle. He didn't need to. By supplying the ousted government with tanks, artillery and communications, he enabled Massoud's men to drive the Taliban back to Kabul. Dostum was able to wait on the sidelines, safeguarding his empire. At the very least, General Dostum has now ended the Taliban threat to his kingdom. And however the current fighting ends, General Dostum is likely to be the winner, choosing the alliances that best serve his faction and expanding his rule to at least half the country. The big unknown is whether his new power will be a harbinger of years more fighting, or a chance to make lasting peace. And that too may depend on the next move of this master of the art of Afghan war.
Just before I leave you tonight, a program note. Our apologies for postponing our full edition on where the jobs are. You will see that tomorrow night. Here's a preview.
Hand them to me with your resume. Let me give you a form to fill out. You have a resume with you?
The news is not all bad when it comes to jobs.
It's the employees market. They can demand the dollars that they think they're worth.
Even with double-digit unemployment, in some areas there are more jobs than people to fill them.
They're involved in computers, automation, engineering, design, marketing.
We'll show you where to find them and how to get them.
The last job fair was that I handed a gentleman my resume. He looked at it and he says, you know what? He says, here's my card. If I don't call you by Monday, you call me. I've got 11 positions for this.
That's where the jobs are, tomorrow on the magazine. And that's it for me and for the magazine for this evening. I'll meet you back here tomorrow. Peter Mansbridge will return in a moment with the National Almanac.
Coming up, a remarkable dog, our Canadian hero for this week.
The trip continued until we had actually no more energy left.
The National Magazine is something you just won't find anywhere else on television. Our domain is limitless. Any issue, individual, we tackle the story in any way we have to, through an interview or an in-depth investigative documentary. We want to talk to the people who make decisions in this country and make them accountable. But is it not a case of also passing the buck? When you talk face to face and look somebody in the eye, it's a totally different dynamic. Let's talk about this guy that you killed. The country, the family, work, it's all changing so much, and we're not only looking at what's wrong, but how to make it better. Tackling the problem. When you go out into a community and you fill a hall full of people, they will tell you the truth.
We're worrying about our future.
I think of the National Magazine as a place where every night this country can get together.
Well, we've brought you lots of Canadian heroes on the National Almanac, heroes who are brave, heroes who are compassionate, selfless, and loyal. Tonight's Canadian hero is all of those and more, and his story will touch your heart. It begins on the Coquihalla Highway near Hope, BC. A car ran through a toll booth. When police followed, the driver stopped and ran into the woods. Giving chase was RCMP officer Doug Lewis and his dog, Chip.
If it wasn't for Chip actually finding the guy first, he took the first fatal shot right to the neck area, and the dog continued on fighting. And then I got involved with it, and the guy charged me at that time. And Chip continued until he had actually no more energy left.
Chip died, but not before he fought.
I tried to give Chip first aid, and then I realized that he wasn't moving, and there was no more blood coming out of his neck area. So, but I tried to stop what was left, and it was useless, actually.
Chip won't be forgotten. Today, dozens of police officers and their dogs took part in a ceremony to honor him. And this chainsaw-carved statue will serve as a permanent reminder of Chip's bravery and other dogs who've died in the line of duty. We honor Chip, too, as tonight's Canadian hero. That's the National for this Tuesday night. Local news is next on most of these stations. Our first news tomorrow, the CBC Morning News. Thanks for watching tonight. We'll see you again tomorrow.